Leave behind. Bono, first of all, love, desire, faith in Crisis, the usual kind of U2 stuff, is it?
That's right.
Right.
Same old fare.
Same old, same old.
Just you just need a good spin and keep people off those favourite subjects.
Right.
See, with Acton Baby, we put pictures of the band wearing eyeshadow and some naked torsos, and it distracted people from, you know, all the sort of the bleeding hearts and that were in the songs. But we didn't on this one. We just said we'll go for it. This is what these songs are about. We're very intense.
Okay, if you look back though on the last bunch of albums, Octung Baby included, and you look at this one now, we're talking a stripped down sound, aren't we? We're talking really bass, guitar, drums, just the four in the studio, with a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and a bit of sampling here, a bit of layering there maybe, but we're not talking technology full front.
Just talking songs.
Yeah.
And it's odd that we haven't made an album where the songs were the most important thing for many years. The concept was always the thing that led us in the studio, you know. Pop, there was some amazing songs. We didn't quite finish them. We ran out of time. But there's some extraordinary songs, and that Please is as good as anything we've ever written. In fact, I just heard a version that Elvis Costello did of that. It's been filmed by Philip King. I don't know for what. It's really, really, really special. And what an honour. A lot of the there was a lot of songs on Pop, but they weren't in the foreground. Do you know what I mean? The ideas behind Pop were in the foreground. On this, there's no big idea, no big concept. It's just, you know, 11 reasons to leave home.
11, and leaving home in terms of going around the world again, is that something you look forward to? I mean, you're musicians, this is what you do. You play in the studio, you play live. There's going to be no big lemons this time. There's going to be no huge big screens and all the rest of it. It's going to be as stripped down maybe as the album is. It's just you in, if you like, arenas as opposed to enormous domes.
Yeah, it's hard to leave your friends and your family and go out for a year. It's hard to leave Dublin and the life that we have for ourselves here. But I do think these songs are a good reason. You know, with some tunes, you have to push them up the hill. I have a feeling that these songs are going to be pushed. They don't want to have to actually hike them.
Would you, on the other hand, though, Larry, look forward to it, to get away from a few nappy nights and teething and all the rest of it? Because it's different this time for you.
No, it's part of the gig, you know. Yeah. And you know, there's when you've made a record that you believe in, when you've written songs that you believe in, you feel good about, you know, it's kind of that does a lot of the work for you. You go out there and you play them and you enjoy them. And one of the things about the past has been, you know, with all the artifice and whatever, they were good fun and it was the right thing to do, but it was tough. It was hard because, you know, some of the songs, the arrangements, they weren't finished, and therefore we were changing arrangements all the time. We're trying to bring them up to scratch. This time around, I don't think we're going to have that problem. So I think it will be a different kind of tour, and also going into arenas as opposed to stadiums. It's a whole different thing, seeing the whites of people's eyes, and you know, we haven't done that for a while. The Octung Baby tour, but it was only like, I think it was.
Like, is it fair to say that when you know, gave it all up to dream it all over again, and then you came back with Octung Baby after Rattling Home and after that sort of grueling world tour, that was one of the most difficult times for you in the studio as four people? I mean, there's going to be hassle all the time anyway, at some stage, and it never seems to be too major with you guys compared to most bands. But would it be fair to say that it was an Octung Baby, that it was tricky for a while?
Well, whenever you're trying to forge some sort of a new thing, there's always a lot of uncertainty at the outset, as there was in the making of Acton Baby. And I think with the making of this record, we also went through periods where things were not very clear, where we had a vague idea of what we wanted to do, but we weren't sure exactly which way it would go. That's okay, as long as you're not sort of accepting second best just to move on.
Okay, there are those who'd say, and I might be one of these who'd agree, that people who make music in their 20s make their best music in their 20s. I think maybe you two have possibly made their best music in their 30s. I mean, first of all, like, I mean, Bob Dylan, no matter what he's done in the last 20 or 30 years, I still think the best music he's ever made is in his 20s. But I think some of the best music that you've made is in your 30s. Is that fair to say, or would I be damning there for the first four albums by sort of putting it that way?
I don't think this
Natural progression, is it?
I think it's a natural progression. I think that on different levels, I think we've been fairly consistent. Some records maybe have not quite made the mark, but I don't see a big difference in the quality of the records. Maybe after the first couple, which I think, you know, first few records you make, you're still finding your feet. But everything since then has been pretty consistent, I think. Time will tell, though. I mean, it's only in another 15 years we're going to look back and know if anyone's going to remember U2 at all, you know. Or in fact, you know, another 50 years if rock and roll is even remembered. It's happened in the past. There's been whole musical movements that have just kind of been forgotten. So, who knows? But I think for instance, the pop record, a lot of people sort of point to that record and that tour as being, you know, kind of our record that didn't quite deliver quite on expectations. But listening back to it, I think the songs are really strong, and I think that those songs will survive, and I think that they will, in a way, I think they might surprise people in a few years' time. Like some of those songs might end up being the ones that people really remember.
But is there any way at all that if you'd had the same amount of time as you've had to make All That You Can't Leave Behind, to make the pop album? I mean, like, you probably had the same amount of time starting off to make the pop album, but as it came towards the end, Pop Mart was looming. You had to do these
true.
dates, and Pop Mart was bigger than the album, and it was just this huge, big lemon.
Well,
basically. So I mean, the point is, like, did you ever think you had to rush the last bits, and maybe some of those songs didn't get their just desserts?
And I think in the finishing, you know, in the kind of the final arrangements, yeah, you're probably right. I think some of them really came through live in a way that they might not have been so clear on the record. That's true.
I'm not sure that it's that straightforward. I think the ones that maybe didn't get finished to quite the same extent were the ones that could have been singles. I think, as Ed said, when you listen to the record away from Pop Mart and everything, you go, those are really good tunes. But maybe there was a lot of pressure on them to be popular on radio, and they weren't up to it.
There's a lot of chaos in the way we make music. We really don't. We still haven't figured it out yet. We had a plan, you know the songs before you record them. I always hated the sound of my voice on the radio, and I was talking to Chrissie Hynde from The Pretenders about this. She says, "What is it about your voice?" And I said, "It just sounds kind of constricted. It sounds uptight. It doesn't sound like it sounds when we're out playing live." She says, Do you know the songs before you sing them?" I says, "No." She says, "Well then." She says, "Do yourself a favour as a singer and know what you're singing about." Because usually I'm writing literally minutes before we sing, or sometimes writing on the microphone the lyrics. And on this one, it's a little bit of a haiku, beautiful day. I was writing about a couple of experiences that I had myself, and one person in particular who everything had gone wrong in their life, and they were down to zero, and suddenly, without the pressure of relationships and possessions and baggage, if you like, they felt this great weight lift off them. And I think that might be true of people. I have another friend who's very, very famous in the world of computers, kind of invented computers, and he was running a business, had never left his room for years and years, and he was diagnosed as having cancer. So he thought, "Oh my God, I've had no life. I better, what am I going to do?" So he gave up his company, and he went out and started meeting people and all the rest. We couldn't believe it was so much fun, actually, the real world. And they cured him, and he's living now, and he never went back to the desk. And I just think, there's freedom in knowing that you need a lot less than you imagine.
making an album in the studio is a very intense, intimate experience. Is there a sense of loss when the studio thing is finished? Is there a sense that almost like, you know, when you finish on tour and it comes to 8 o'clock at night and you're sitting at home watching telly and you jump up on the coffee table and start singing because like I'm on. Is it the same when you leave a studio like God, this intimate thing is over now like it's just finished, a sense of complete goneness?
I loathe the studio. I loathe it. I hate being in the studio, and I'm just delighted to get out into the air.
Really?
I think it might be different for other people. What about you, Larry?
No, I think, you know, it depends on, you know, you've spent a year and a half of your life in a studio making music at close quarters, no women folk, dodgy food occasionally, and when you've worked hard, you've written the songs, and it's finished, and when you listen on that last night to what you've done and everything, all the mixes are there, and when it's great, when you listen to it and go, you know what, I couldn't have done any better than that. Actually, that's good work. There's an incredible sense of relief, you know. I think when you've finished and you feel, you know what, I really wish we'd had another chance to do that or chance to do something else, there is a feeling of a really low, because you know you're going to have to go out on the road or go to the press and talk to people about your record and about what you've done. So it changes from album to album, but there's no doubt the studio is a very, it can be a hostile environment.
Well, do you think then that the journey you made for Rattle and Hum in delving into the sort of roots of the music that meant something to you as a kid, i.e. the American blues music or whatever, was more fun as a journey than, say, the pop journey, which was delving into the now music and the current music and the technology and the hip-hop and the dance music?
That's a good question.
I get the impression you probably did have more fun in the Rattle and Hum journey than in dabbling in the other stuff in '97 with the pop album.
I think, you know, it was probably easier to connect with because it was about human beings doing something. It was about real emotion. And I think one of the dangers with technology and stuff like that, you know, I enjoy it, and I love using it because it makes particularly me sound great playing to a drum machine.
Come on, Larry.
Yeah, absolutely, and I embrace that, and I think that's great. But I do think that you find yourself, you are competing at a different level. Yeah. And there's a lot of people doing similar things. And you know, you're dealing with modern technology. I think certainly during the Rattle and Hum period, it was going into some studios and playing as a band. There was something quite pure about that. On the other hand, that whole period, we got hammered for it because I think people misunderstood what it was we were doing, and I think, you know, that we were fans of that music, and it was an area we didn't know that much about.
But there were some brilliant songs came out of that.
Absolutely,
brilliant new U2 songs.
Absolutely,
within the genre that you were exploring.
But I mean, we weren't about it as fans, though.
That's what I mean.
Whereas I think a lot of people thought we were trying to now we're experts at the blues or whatever. It was kind of a bit silly.
I'm no good with chords, so what we do is get somebody else to play.
Is it a question in some ways now of saying you've got to sort of stay fresh and not become a parody? I mean, the Rolling Stones have stayed fresh in many ways, kind of thing, but lots of times they just parody themselves. Up to 20 years ago they were doing that even. Now you haven't done that. Do you sit there constantly and say, wait a minute, gotta be fresh, gotta be fresh? Like Bono said something about this album saying, there's no reverse, something about you too, there's no reverse gear on this tank. And yet, I mean, in many ways, this is a little bit of a hark back to the past of just pure songs of the 40 in the studio and bass, drums, vocals and guitar. So is it a question of, you gotta stay fresh though? I mean, do you ever get worried that you can still hack it?
I think you do actually, yeah, but that's not new. That's a feeling that you know we always have, because there's no guarantee that when you show up in the studio that it's going to happen. I remember going through this with Acting Baby, where really the first few weeks in Berlin were really pretty grim. Nothing much was happening, and then we hit on one, and it was like, okay, things are okay. We still got it. And I think the same would be true on this record, where the first few weeks, months of songwriting didn't produce that much that we were happy with. But then you know, you hit on a few things and suddenly you've got a few clues and you're away. But you never lose that, and I guess being complacent is an easy way of making really awful music. We're lucky about that. We're not good enough to be complacent.
I think as long as there's a commitment to, you know, stick at it for as long as it takes to get it right, then you don't make the compromises. But I think it's when people aren't prepared to kind of make those commitments and, you know, have to go off and do other things, that then you might be parodying yourself. But, I mean, you know, we all put the time into this record until it was right, and Dan put the time into it, and Brian put the time into it, and we got there in the end.
Well, if people look back now, we can look back with a whole decade gone at the 80s and say the words like pompous, self-righteous maybe, earnest, if that's possibly true and if they were wiped away in the 90s. Could you look back and say, yeah, we were that in the 80s, but hey, that's what we were.
I'd admit to earnest.
Oh, really?
That's about as far as
Let's
I
talk
go.
about pompous and self-righteous here. That's the only thing I'm interested in.
We were desperately earnest. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the pompous thing is just, you know, very loud rock and roll in big venues. It often is, but I mean, who cares? But self-righteous, I don't buy that. I really don't. I think we were always very aware that we were deeply flawed characters, and there's never any sense that we would say anything other than that in the work. I think people might have misinterpreted certain things as being self-righteous, but that's...
Self-righteous, no. Pompous, yes. What was the other one?
Earnest. Like,
Oh, yeah. Yes, the important